He says, you can't talk to a woman about that. For him, ubudoda hung between his legs. Ubudoda was simply physical manhood. And you can certainly speak of it that way. You know, when people are being inspected, they say, and then they come in and they twitch your ubudoda to check for infection. But by that time, particularly these were urban people, the notion of a woman having ubudoda was not only nonsensical, but rude. It was impolite to even talk about ubudoda to a woman. So the idea itself, meanings of manhood, have changed over time. Okay. The interesting thing about all of this is that manhood was not lost. Manhood just came to mean other things. Things in the 1970s on the mines changed radically. It was the 1990, the price of gold went up, so the mines could afford to pay more. Hastings Banda, President for Life, withdrew 110,000 Malawian workers. The total mine workforce was close to 50,000. 110,000 of them left over 6 months. They were gone. Mozambique had its revolution, and the Mozambique's workers dropped way off. The mines realized that they had to get workers, and that they were going to have to look in South Africa. Also, you know, the cordon was kind of closing SADC. So they essentially paid more and started to recruit South Africans, who had, but you know, in 1970, 70% of the workforce was from outside of South Africa. By 1980, 70% of the workforce was from South Africa, mostly from the Transkei, and there were a lot more people from Lesotho as well. So, but these South Africans came in. They were better educated than the previous South African workers. The old guys from Pondoland kept coming. But these guys started coming out from the Ciskei and from Limpopo, and they were much more stroppy. And the mines controlled, and they deserted and so on and so forth. The mines controlled it by basically creating what was called a re-engagement bonus certificate. You got a bonus if you came back after the holidays. You got Christmas holidays basically home. You couldn't time your own stay. You couldn't sign a contract at any time. I mean, it used to be that it was always hard during harvest time for the mines to get workers because the guys were all home doing harvest. So this was all much more rigid now. And if you didn't come back with you didn't only get a bonus, you also, if you didn't come back in the time, you also lost your seniority. So you started again as a lasher. So that sort of tightened up on the labor force very considerably. And people became what Jonathan Crush calls career miners. They became sort of mine commuters to a much greater extent than the old mine migrants. They still sent money home. They still went home, but they went home at one time around Christmas. So it was a much tighter kind of system, and they, as I said, they were somewhat better educated. They started to confront mine authorities on racial issues. And the NUM was very important. The rise of the NUM, often in 1985. Things like unfair dismissals, health and safety issues, were crucially important, but confrontation and of course, collective bargaining. But the central issue in the 1980s was confronting mind racism. And again, they confronted these guys confronted mind racism as men, who felt that their dignity as men were being denied to them by being called boys and by being pushed around by white guys and by black boss boys, black team leaders. I had one old team leader whom I spoke to in Wonderland who said to me, because I said to him, the team leaders, they beat the workers. He said, yeah, a lot of the team leaders beat the workers, but I didn't. I worked with them to get them to work better. His name was Rainer Dushu, a very impressive old chap, and I could just see it. He was practicing Ubuntu even with the other workers, but he was in charge. Okay, so Ubuntu seems to have moved from being a moral to a biological concept over time. And then the hostels are being depopulated and people are moving into informal settlements. And gold mining is being decimated. When I went to Welkom initially doing research in 1975, there were 8 or 9 mines. Now there's 1, if it's still going. People are being laid off. Platinum mining is booming. So the question of this kind of extraordinary sense of male integrity, where has it gone? And what's happened to it? Part of it was picked up into the NUM, which made the NUM a very powerful organization. It represented Ubuntu order in many sorts of ways. But let me end by moving away from my stuff. Have I got time for another 10 minutes? Let me just talk a bit about what our students, SWOP students here, are finding about mine workers now in the platinum mines. Asanda Benya, is Asanda here? Hi, Asanda. Asanda Benya and Tabang, is Tabang here? Great, so you guys can answer the questions when these come up. Asanda has worked for a year as a winch driver underground. There are now women in mining. And Tabang has been spending the last year and a half or so simply sitting down and talking to old men in the Welkom area who have been laid off from the mines. Asanda described the platinum mines there was a sort of reform of the work process that took place on platinum under a guy called Steve Kearney in the early 1990s, where they created smaller teams and focused on smaller teams doing more productive work, which was very successful from the point of view of productivity. Asanda describes a process whereby men going underground, start developing a kind of attentiveness, mindfulness. It reminds me of Thich Nhat Hanh. A sort of focus on the job from when they get to the crush where they put in their cards, on their way down in the cage. They're building together an attentiveness to the kinds of dangers they're going to face. So that when they get to the rock face, they have already constituted themselves as a kind of a work team, a work community. If a man is going through a divorce, then they say to him, no, you can work on the safe side. We're not going to be safe if you're working on the rock face. Similarly, if a child is sick or whatever. And similarly, Asanda found for women. They also she tried to become part of this team, but this team is male. There are, however, Asanda says, skilled miners, certified miners, who are women. And a lot of the guys want to work on their team because these women really produce, and production means a bonus. But so they are, in a sense, women with manhood. And for them, it's very difficult, they say, coming back to the surface, becoming women again when they go home. Because as certified miners running the teams, they are definitely men. That's Sana can expand on that. Tabang finds that, and what Tabang is talking about is the impact of proletarianization. The period in the 1970s produced proletarianized workers. They sent money home, but they said, when they sent the money home, they told me, our children eat our money. Farming has died. People don't plow anymore in the rural areas. And these guys, for these guys, manhood is associated with getting a check. Manhood is associated with getting wages. And now they've been laid off. They've been laid off. And they hang around. And they drink a lot and they talk. But they feel as though their bodies are incomplete. Their bodies have been shattered by the fact that they don't get a wage. Some of them work as they're gathering scrap metal, but they say that's not work. What they need to complete their manhood, they can't sleep with their wives anymore. They can find lovers sometimes. For them, what constitutes manhood is having a wage job. Tabang's story is one of the saddest stories I've heard, given this kind of context. I don't know how he manages to keep going, talking to these guys. So, just two conclusions, and then I'll stop. First of all, masculinity, maleness, is not fixed. In different contexts, you get different kinds of masculinity, different kinds of practices and conceptions of manhood. That's number one. Number two, men who have been wage workers build wage work into their very psyche as men.
Thanks, Dunbar, for those really interesting reflections on a long period of your own work and on changing masculinities. We can open for comments or questions from you. There. Yep. You right here.
Oh, can I just speak?
Yes. Or stand up and say who you are.
My name is Tabang. I work for CCDU as a project coordinator. But you can't hear me. Yeah. I was trying not to use this.
Just use the mic. Everyone can hear well.
Okay. I was saying that my name is Tabang Madileng. I'm the project coordinator at CCDU. My question simply is this: having said what you said, how do we look at masculinity after Marikana? When this notion that you put forward to say, some men see themselves as being providers of the family, as protectors of the family, when Marikana dealt exactly with those two things. How do we protect our family when we're seen as these, people who have no defenses? We can't, fight against these police. Secondly, we go on strike and we have no means of providing for our families. So how do you then put masculinity into context there? Is it a matter of saying we can hold the economy to ransom, and that is us saying we're taking control to substitute the part about providing and defending your family? Thanks.
Okay, we'll take another couple. So right back there.
Thanks, Doctor. My name is Trina Mafachana. I'm from the Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. I came running here, Prof, because I didn't want to miss this important topic. I started from other men at Park Station. That is the BEE group, because they are making the society happy. That's why I define them as men. One of the important things as part of my comment is that the topic today deals with mining. A very terrible thing that happened in Africa as a whole. Because since mining came, we experienced a lot, and I fully agree with you, that the majority of people that worked in the mines were deprived of their manhood. For an example, during that period in 1984, there was that tendency of making other men, women, in the mines. Though it is not popularized, no one is talking about it. Because if you hold a man for 12 months and you say you cannot go home, you have to be underground, and then after work, you are not able to see a woman, to have sex, to be specific. It's a problem. Then the alternative